That's right. That's who he is, Joel Cordes. Welcome into the show. That's who LeBron James is.
I knew you were going to hot mic me.
Welcome. Well, I thought you were done talking.
You person.
As I press record, it takes like a 2 or 3 second lag, and then it records. And I thought you were done. Anyway, as you can tell, we were watching Baby Jesus LeBron take on, well, mainly Baby LeBron, who is what we've discussed. Listen, he was punched in the face. What do you want him to do? Not stay on the floor for 80 seconds? Anyway,
I mean, the amount of non-fouls he draws is akin to watching Michael Jordan back in the day, and it was honestly, and I really appreciate having watched MJ, but that was the most infuriating thing. And I know it was back in the 90s, there was a lot more fouling going on, period. But the calls that Jordan used to get that nobody else would get just drove me insane. And it's one of the few gripes that I have with LeBron, even though I know he gets hammered at certain times, but like the star treatment in the NBA, one of the few things I can't stand about it, even though I love it to death.
Well, that's how you get stars if you don't get star treatment, brother. That's why you become a star. So we've come into this pod hot. A lot has happened since we've last spoken, and we're going to get to the vast majority of it. Some of it's going to be old news. Don't care about like the Spurs going down. I guess we can talk for a minute.
Are you slamming the shirt or like?
No, your shirt's fine. Your shirt is fine, but so is Ja Morant, by the way. He is fine too, by the way.
Yeah. PHINE fine.
Yes, you added extra letter. Is it a letter?
Speaking of letters and digits, before we get too far into this, and we won't take any time with this one, this is episode 62, and like last week, only 2 players in NBA history have ever worn this number. One of them was back in 1947. That's not even NBA times, but Bob Dill of the Detroit Falcons.
Oh.
The Detroit Falcons in 1947 wore that number, but I'm not going to go old school like I did last time. We're going to go a little bit newer schooler, and that would be Scott Pollard wore it for 3 seasons with the Indiana Pacers from 04 to 06. So without further and any more ado whatsoever, we don't really need to talk about Scott Pollard.
No, we
don't.
The
Scott Pollard episode. Let's do it.
We do need to talk about what's just going on. You may want to look to your right in just a moment. Chris Paul just went down in a lot of pain to his right arm, his shooting arm.
Hopefully did not separate his shoulder, but
midway through the
Chris
second
Paul,
quarter.
Of course, has had this sort of misfortune in the playoffs and slightly before the playoffs many, many times. And how many of his teams have been derailed at playoff time because suddenly he was not available?
Yeah, I mean that's really one of the literal few things bad you can say at all about Chris Paul. I mean, clearly it's not because he doesn't want to play in the big moments or anything.
Right.
It's just fate and destiny are weird things sometimes, and sometimes it's the timing too. And Phoenix has started out pretty well. I forgot to see when they were going up. I think they're up like 7 or 8 or something on the Lakers. But we're gonna get to all of that. So this has started out very hot shotty. Thanks, Scott Pollard. We're gonna talk about other things like I think for me the most interesting thing to start with is how Brooklyn looked against Boston on Saturday.
But you do you. Well, we can talk Nets. That's not the most interesting thing for me, but continue.
We'll let you bring up the next topic. How about that?
All right.
I just find it fascinating that Brooklyn was so bad in the first half. I think they were at one point 1 of 13 from beyond the arc. Maybe that was for the entire first half.
Yeah.
And Boston looked not even good. It was not defensive. Boston wasn't like on them the entire time. They got plenty of open shots to Brooklyn. They just could not hit. And then Brooklyn starts the second half with 22 points from their big 3 in a row. And then they were sort of off to the races to win by double digits. I don't want to spend a ton of time on this game just because it sort of felt like the series will sort of lean and go this way, especially since maybe the 3 guys who performed well, especially in the second half, all 3 of them did.
They did
put up good numbers and played really well together. But the thoughts on how it took them a half to sort of figure it out, and then when they did figure it out and were able to sort of hit those shots, that they looked like the kind of the Brooklyn team we thought they could look like.
The game, in a lot of ways, reminded me of what we saw with the Lakers and the Warriors in their play-in game, right? The Warriors had a really nice first half. Lakers were down, not playing well, and yet you still had that feeling that LA was and very capable of making a run, and that no halftime lead really meant anything. And that proved to be true with the Nets and the Celtics. Once the Nets settled in, as you said, the sheer firepower really was too much, just as in the same way for the Lakers, once they settled in and kind of got a game plan actually going against what they were going to do against the Warriors. You saw the depth and the talent of the Lakers just kind of slowly chip away and overwhelm Golden State, who still played a very good game, but just felt like a player short. Mm-hmm. For the Nets and the Celtics, Boston's been a disjointed team all year that has had some good individual performances. And Brooklyn, in a lot of ways, has been the same, right? Disjointed at times because of injury, because of circumstance, because of new additions and a revolving door with players, but have had plenty of good individual and like two-man performances. So if you have a game that really comes down to all things being equal in that case, Brooklyn just flat out has the better players. It's really that simple, that if it's going to be a game of individual performances, Brooklyn is going to beat a lot of teams at that game.
They have more guys that can put up those type of individual performances.
Exactly.
And then that's exactly what we saw Saturday night.
Yeah, and for them to be in trouble, they're going to have to run into a team that not only has the talent of individual players and more than just a Jason Tatum, right? That's one guy at the superstar level. It's going to be a team of multiple superstars and who has that cohesiveness, that system, that identity, that sort of thing working for them in addition to their talent. That's going to be the type of team that might be able to out-execute what Brooklyn does and just take one of those superstars out of it and slow them down. Because you notice, like, as big as Brooklyn's big three was, they didn't get many contributions from anybody else on the roster, save for Joe Harris, who had 10 points. Like, that's how you can beat them. Brooklyn just doesn't, or Boston, doesn't have the horses to do it.
Well, and I thought, and then we can sort of end the Boston and Brooklyn talk with this. I thought the way that game started, and even through halftime for Boston, was the perfect way to set up for Boston to get a game in this, especially on the road. It could not have worked out better for them how Brooklyn looked. Again, it wasn't because Brooklyn had great defense and they were smothered the entire time, especially from beyond the arc. They were not smothered. They were barely covered. They were not a Waffle House menu for hash browns. They were simply missing the big open shots, almost all of them.
Yeah.
And that just wasn't the case in the second half. And it showed that Boston just was not deep enough and had enough playmakers to sort of to keep up. And,
Brooklyn had been off for almost a week, right? And they talked about coming into an almost full house in Barclays Center for the first time all year. And so you got a little bit of rust. You've got acclimating to the crowd. Kyrie talked about that, how it was just a totally different atmosphere. And it took just a little bit to wrap your mind around that. So they came out rusty. And again, that was only the 9th time all season the big three had played together. So there's a lot of extenuating factors there where you go, yeah, I can see one bad half of basketball coming out of that.
Oh, sure. And that was going to be Boston's best shot. Like, that was that shot. That was their chance to go into halftime up like 10-12 or so and to try to maintain the rest of the way. Joel, what was your most interesting thing from the first day and a half-ish of the playoffs that we have?
Well, I mean, dialing back, I'm very, very surprised that we didn't see Golden State, they lose 2 heartbreaking games. And I just alluded to it before with the Lakers and Warriors game. They felt like one player short, and you just wonder where they would have been if Kelly Oubre would have been healthy. Certainly James Wiseman would have been helpful if he had been available to this. Where they're going to go with that, I don't know. To me, the most interesting thing, I think, is probably what Portland did to Denver in that late game that probably not as many people saw. Certainly the Milwaukee and Miami game was fantastic. We can talk about them in a minute. That's going to be just a prize fight type of a series. But Portland did something really interesting to me, and that was daring Nikola Jokic to score as many points as he could get, and really kind of playing the psychological side of this that says Jokic's game is to make other people better, to be a facilitator, and then to get his when the defense allows it. So what is he going to do when we don't allow anybody else to get better and beat us, and we put him into those single coverages where, yeah, he can score a bunch of points, but it really is not his DNA to be a shoot first guy. And they dared him to be shoot first, and he doesn't really want to do that. And without Jamal Murray, who's absolutely a shoot first guy, Denver really looked to be lacking a piece, despite Aaron Gordon, Michael Porter Jr. playing okay, and they had some supporting cast stuff. You know, Portland is a good team. We've talked about that there's a lot of potential there with that group. But just that approach that they took was really intriguing to me. And then you look at Portland, they played 8 guys. Everybody had the type of game that they should have from that roster, with the exception of Enes Kanter, who was 2 points and 4 boards, and all of that's really low for him. But every single other person, you look at the box score and you're like, yeah, they're exactly in the range they should have been. And this is going to be a tough matchup for Denver if they're going to dare Jokic to do that all series. He's going to have to go against his very core and start scoring first, and that's going to open up other people for him to begin facilitating later.
Yeah, I didn't think that Portland and you know, we sort of have we've heard a version of this before, like the type of defense, like let the big guy, the main guy, the presumptive MVP guy, let them get theirs. Just don't let anybody else make plays, right? Just slow everybody down else to a crawl and let the other guy do what he can do. But because Portland knows they can score at will against just about anybody in the league, just about anybody. So if they can just get enough from if everyone just sort of shows up, doesn't have to have a world-stopping performance, and you just let Nikola Jokic get his, you've got a pretty good shot at being in that game when it gets to the fourth quarter. And that's really all you can sort of ask. And I didn't think Portland would play a game like that. Like, I didn't think that would be a strategy that we'd see the Trailblazers go into Denver with. But it's actually obviously because they won game one, it's a pretty smart one. But if you think about this sort of lesser than Denver team, and especially with such a young guy in Jokic and such a young guy sort of having to be the leader and the guy having to take over this team the last few months, essentially a lot by himself, being the guy, the leader of it. It's a lot to ask of someone in that space, and that is an interesting play that Portland has put in.
And Portland has not been a good defensive team all year, right? So it's a little bit risky for them to take that scheme, especially when you have...
Yeah, but we could give up 70 to them.
But here again, it comes down to matchups. And you say Lillard and McCollum are not great defenders, but Denver does not have the wings or the guards right now without Murray to really punish them for doing that. And with no Will Barton, it gets even better. Like, McCollum and Lillard can just compete on that end. If that's all they can do, that should be enough against the likes of, Campazzo and who even got the start yesterday, and then Austin Rivers, who had 6 points. Like, you can survive with that. Then up front, where Denver is a lot more dangerous, you look at Gordon and Michael Porter Jr., the Blazers are equipped to at least make those guys work pretty hard. You've got Robert Covington, who still is a very plus defender, and Norman Powell, who's a plus defender in his own right. So Yusuf Nurkic against Jokic, he's just going to have to hang in there. But if the game plan is, look, Nurk, you're in single coverage, you battle him, stay out of foul trouble. But if he's going to score, he's going to score. We are not going to send much help. We're going to lock down these other guys because our roster, for whatever reason, matches up really, really well with what the Nuggets are trotting out. You look at this and go, Jokic may have to get in his mind that he's going to score 45 points in a game, and he's going to dare them to start double teaming him so that he can start finding open guys again. And this, again, is where without a Will Barton shot maker, without a Jamal Murray shot maker, you wonder if the Nuggets will have somebody to punish Lillard and McCollum for being who they are.
Well, it's their playoffs last year, right? Like, if you you may just have to have like someone this year be Jokic to just go off and say, listen, I'm going to have to take control and score as many times as possible. And, that's if the strategy sort of continues this way for Portland. Remember, I said in sort of our preview that I picked Denver, but that's just because I picked Denver to win at the beginning of the year, and I didn't want to bail out on the first round. This is not a terrible matchup for Portland. It's a very winnable first round for Portland.
Yeah, I would say this one is very much capable of going 7 games, and it's a bad matchup for Denver in the same way that Miami is a tough matchup for Milwaukee too. Like, it's just a bad draw that they got.
Well, let's talk about Miami and Milwaukee. Game goes to overtime. Milwaukee gets the win, but it was a dogfight the entire way, and it was this is playoff basketball, Joel.
Yeah, it was fun.
This is the kind of game that you come to watch. And listen, it's lower scoring than usual. Sort of get that. It goes way under the total 227, even with overtime. And it's not just that, like it's old school basketball talk. Like, it was two teams being super physical. Miami shooting the lights out of the 3, still losing. Milwaukee not shooting the 3 at all well and winning. Like, it was this game where, like, none of the numbers seemed like that they sort of made sense to the trend of the game. So you just had to watch the game, and the game was great.
It was. And yeah, you mentioned Miami shot very well from 3, very well from the free throw line. Milwaukee did not from either of those places, but Milwaukee did okay from 2, whereas Miami really didn't overall. Miami just a couple more. Miami got out rebounded quite badly by Milwaukee, and that may be the secret of the game in there, is that the Bucks getting those extra chances inside, and Giannis and Brook Lopez too were very, very active on the offensive boards, keeping extra chances alive. And you look up and down that list, not only did Giannis have 18 boards, but the backcourt, Drew Holiday, 11 rebounds, Dante DiVincenzo, who is not known as a rebounder, he scored 3 points on the day, but had 10 boards as well. You're right. It was an absolute fight. It was a game of like miniature runs back and forth, just kind of punch for punch.
Yes.
And nobody ever seemed like they were in a
Chris Middleton with the game winner in overtime. Mm-hmm. Like, what more do you want from a basketball game? Like, that's it. That's great. Formerly what I grew up in, Eastern Conference basketball.
Very much so. And we talk about Miami being a bad matchup for Milwaukee. It's not so much that Miami has something that the Bucks don't, where there's the advantage in that case. It's just that Miami is so good for being a 6th seed for all of the reasons we talked about before. They're battle tested, they're talented enough, but that talent is also very cohesive and interchangeable in the way they want to play. They definitely have an identity as a team that they hang their hat on. So they were going to be tough for anybody in the first round. And that's what makes them that tough matchup for Milwaukee, is the Bucks are going to have to work really hard to get through this first round series alive. Whereas like Philly and Brooklyn, you go, yeah, you got to show up and play playoff basketball because it's the playoffs, but you're probably going to be okay against Boston or against Washington. Whereas Milwaukee, they got to show up and play second round conference level finals level basketball in the first round, or they will not be okay.
Someone that may not be okay is your world champion pick, Los Angeles Clippers. They lose by 10 at home in another physical basketball game that Joel, I'll let you take the lead on this in just a second, but there is another young man that's playing basketball really well. He's the guy I thought preseason would be your MVP, who was manhandling guys. Like when Patrick Beverly like got switched on him at some point, and like he went and like it took like a bump and a half to get him like under the bucket, get him a foul and a bucket, and I think he yelled, "You're too effing small," which is true.
Yes.
But that game, when you have playoff Paul, who did not play badly in that game, and you had Kawhi Leonard, and then you have the fighting Luka Doncic's of the world. I'm not surprised that Dallas is able to win a game like that. It's just not the Dallas I've seen consistently this year to think that they were going to win the series, and they still may not, but a very good showing by them in game 1.
It was, and this is another one of those matchups like we saw last year with these two teams that should be highly entertaining. That'll go 6 or 7 games. Luka presents that problem to a lot of the Clippers guards. There was times that Reggie Jackson, who's a longer arm point guard, got switched or put on Luka initially, and they are just too small. Like, he has the ability to bulldoze you inside. And then even if he doesn't get to point blank to the basket, it's the ability to do that turnaround, that step back, to just create a little bit of space, because not only can he bulldoze you down, but then there's the length to be able to get that shot off. You put a bigger defender on Luka, and he's not fast enough to blow by you, but he still just finds a way to get to his spots. And so I don't know if the answer, it probably is honestly got to be Kawhi and Paul George exclusively, with a little bit of Nick Batum thrown in there. Those are the 3 guys that I think have to be playing Doncic exclusively at this point. And you put your smaller guys, whether it be Rondo or Reggie Jackson was out there, Patrick Beverly, what have you, those smaller guys are just going to have to match up against somebody like Dorian Finney-Smith, where they really are outsized, but you're going to challenge somebody like Finney-Smith to beat you offensively, because that's not who they are. And I think the Clippers got a little bit cute with some of the matchups that were there, and they're going to have to rethink a lot of that. You're not going to slow Doncic down, but you got to make him work a little bit harder. And granted, Doncic didn't play all that great in the fourth quarter, right? He had like 1 point in the entire fourth, but other people got hot, and Dallas had 2 guys over 20 points and 3 other guys above 12 points. You look at the Clippers, they had 2 guys above 20 points and nobody else above 10, 11 points. The Clippers are going to need one other guy, whether it be Marcus Morris, whether it be Serge Ibaka, it could be Reggie Jackson. Batum can do it every once in a while. They're going to need somebody else out of that group to be up around 20 points. They were balanced. It was a decent game back and forth, but you just felt like Kawhi and Paul George were having to carry a little bit too much of the offensive load. And here again, like you alluded to, Dallas hasn't had a ton of these games where they really lock people down, because they've been a bad defensive team through much of the year too, just like Portland was.
Yeah. That's why I think you and I sort of gave so much credence to the Clippers going to be able to wouldn't say easily, but comfortably win a series like this, is because we didn't think that they'd, and the Clippers are a solid defensive team, and they got a couple of playmaking stars that can score and a pretty decent bench behind them. You just didn't expect a game like this. I didn't, I should say. And I don't know if I expect it consistently throughout the series. I still like the Clippers sort of long-term for this. There's a couple of games I still want to get to, but I do want to mention, just to you because we're talking, I don't know if you see, but Chris Paul's back in the game. The Lakers have gotten within 3, but now they stretched their lead back out to a dozen. Or the Clippers, that's in the Suns. The Suns. Yep. Sorry, the Lakers had gotten to 3, and the Suns have stretched it back out to about a dozen. And now Anthony Davis, who is not having a great first half. By the way, Montrezl Harrell's having a great first half. He's got like 10 points and 5 rebounds. He's doing pretty good out there.
And that just to, I mean, I know we don't want to get too much into the Lakers because that game will be done before we even get to print here, so to speak.
I like that before this gets to the presses. I like it.
But it does speak to one of the things the Lakers do have, which is a lot of depth and a lot of battle-tested depth, and a lot of different guys that they can keep plugging and playing in different matchups, where if Drummond's not doing well, okay, you give Marc Gasol a try in certain cases. You give Harrell a try. The Lakers very quietly added a lot of usable wing pieces throughout the year so that it wasn't just Wes Matthews and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope being asked to do so much. And that is one of the secret sauce things that they've got beyond just LeBron and Anthony Davis is the depth is better than you think, especially for a 7th seed. And that's going to be one of the things they push people on.
Okay, so let me ask you about the other game that we've seen so far today, and that was the 76ers getting a 7-point win over Washington. Washington was in that game for a long time. They were 8-point underdogs, and I think this was like the first or maybe just the second playoff plus play-in game that went over the total. So we've seen a lot more defense, as you sort of expect, with time off and the playoffs ramping up defensive basketball.
And with fuller arenas, I think does have
Sure.
something to do with that too. Again, because of that acclimation factor, guys, the background has changed, and you may not make as many shots because of rhythm. And of course, if you're the road team, you actually have some crowd noise to fight against, and you are not used to doing that throughout this season. So
yes, that's so true. We're so close to getting to normal. We're so close to getting normal basketball. Maybe by the finals, everyone will be, or at least the participants will be in the. By the way, I read this interesting thing about Boston, is that Boston goes back home next week for games 4 and 5. I think they have the 28th and the 30th, if I'm not mistaken, are the games at home against Brooklyn. The 28th is before the allowment of full arenas by the city of Boston.
Yep.
The 29th is when they will allow full arenas. 30th is when their next game. So I think with them and the NBA, they're going to be able to go to like 50 or slightly above 50% in game 3. And in game 4, it could be closer to full capacity, which is just wild. It's just like one day, like 2 days apart. And it's the day of the week being the 29th. It's just think it's so interesting that like it's not for both games. It'll be one game you can have some more, and maybe the next game even more.
It's like when the pandemic started. There's a whole lot of arbitrary to dates and rules and whatever, but at some point, just like you had to start your quarantines and lockdowns and all that unfun stuff, you had to start it at some point, and there was no real easy way to do it.
Right.
Now trying to come back and move things back to normal, there's no real smooth way to do it. It's like, yes, today will be the day because we had to decide on a day.
Right.
And so here it is. And,
that's why I think it's funny when people get mad. It's like, oh, so the 15th it's okay, but the 14th is not. It's like, shut up. We're picking a
right.
day.
Don't you want it to be okay? Like,
why are you mad now?
let's keep following the rules. If you can and you're comfortable to get a vaccine, please, go do it. Like, that's all good stuff. Yeah. The more people that participate in that, the better and easier and smoother this is going to go for everybody. And if you don't want to get a vaccine, that's fine, I guess. But, keep honoring the mask thing as long as you have to. And like, let's just all keep working together, because I hope people are seeing it's so much more fun getting to the other side of this and getting back to normalcy rather than us sitting and carping and complaining about, well, I have to do this and they're telling me to do this. Well, yeah, if everyone would just do it, we wouldn't have what's telling us to do it in the first place.
We'd probably have full arenas already.
Yeah.
I don't want to make this political. I just think it's funny that people are now mad about dates. It's like, yeah, okay, we just picked a date because that's when things, because we have to get everything in place for said date. So just shut up and do it, or don't do it. You worry or you won't. Just enjoy the games, all right? We're just getting people back in the stands. Let's relax, all right?
There's the truth that you can never please everybody, and there's always some people, regardless of what side of the political spectrum you are or whatever, there are always some people who are never happy about anything, right? I mean, it's a fact of life. So
Cam Johnson almost hit a floater buzzer beater to get us to halftime. Instead, my over 213 bet for this game, which was looking pretty good through a quarter and a half, has slowed down considerably.
Neither you or I, nor I, are Lakers fans. Not that we're haters, but I respect LeBron. I respect what the Lakers are trying to do. They're a good team. But I want nothing more than Phoenix to like sweep them. I don't think it's going to happen, but.
Well, I want it for you. I don't want it for my picks, but I want it for you. So that's why I played the total and not the spread. So the game we were just about to mention, the Washington Wizards taking on Philadelphia, which was like I was saying, it was one of the first games that has gone over at the total, which is the biggest of deals, but also big because Philadelphia struggled at points in that game against Washington. Washington looked a lot better than what we saw them in the first play-in game, and they looked better in their second play-in game that got them to the tournament, where they are at now, and they looked pretty good, but they were playing a better team in Philadelphia, and they gave sort of a yeoman's effort for game one. So if you don't mind, give me a couple of words on what you thought about Washington's efforts against Philadelphia.
here again, I think matchup means so much in the optics of a performance. So like against Boston, the Celtics had Jason Tatum on Russell Westbrook. They had some bodies to throw at Bradley Beal, who did not look great, and it made Washington work, and the Celtics get that win out of it. They had just enough. Wizards matchup against Indiana, who had been that had been a bad matchup for the Pacers all year, and a lot of it had to do with the fact that the Pacers did not have the type of guards who could check Russell Westbrook and Bradley Beal. They just got whatever they wanted, and it wound up opening up so many other things for the rest of the Wizards, who played really well, and you saw that blowout of Indiana. Now,
yeah,
Washington,
by the way, if you played the under in the Indiana game, you clearly have not seen basketball in this season at all.
This season. But now Washington goes up against Philly, who not only are the Sixers more talented, like that's not even a question, and the Sixers have Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, who the Wizards really don't have an answer for either of those guys, like somebody that's going to check them and cancel them out in any way. But Philly is loaded with wings and guards who will play credible defense on Westbrook and Beal. They can actually make those guys work, whether it be Danny Green or Matisse Thybulle, who is very quietly one of the best defenders in the league, even if he's a horrible offensive player. But Shake Milton, Furkan Korkmaz, they've got long enough arms. Tobias Harris, you could throw in there on Beal at times. Seth Curry can give you some minutes, even if he's not a defender. The point is they've got bodies in addition to a big rim protector in Joel Embiid and one of the best switchy defenders in Ben Simmons in the league.
I like you saying switchy.
Yeah, so like they've got the defensive horses to slow down, not negate, but very much compete with what Washington does best. On the flip side, Washington does not have that when you look at Philadelphia's stars. So this is just, it's a poor matchup for the Wizards. I am impressed that Washington was able to stay that close. Like you said, there was a little bit of rust going on with Philly having been off and Washington not having played recently. That does matter for something, but this very well could be a sweep just based on those matchups I talked about.
Yeah, so when I looked at sort of the playoff, what do you call it, the brackets, right? Like you saw the matchups put out there, and I hate sweeps, right? Like unless it's the start of the Knicks sweeping the Hawks starting in a little bit. I just hate them. Like I think it takes away from the game, and I'm not saying like this is NBA needs to do something to step in. It's just
right.
The more competitive the series, the more interesting for people and for fans, and more games for me to bet and things like that. I thought this was the only one that I felt really confident would be a sweep. Like out of all the matchups, I thought there was a couple that would be sort of spongy on 5 games. But this is the one that felt like that sweep. This is the one that, like, you talk about the depth of just playmakers. You talk about the teams that are better offensively versus defensively. And in this time, defensively is very, very important. And you aren't just playing on a random Tuesday in December. This felt like nice run, Washington. I saw the stat that NBA, the ESPN's made up this basketball power index or whatever, which is made up and it's stupid. But like about 2 or 2.5 months ago, they gave them a 0.6% chance to make the playoffs, and now they're in the playoffs, which shows you how stupid it is.
And but kudos to Washington,
But not stupid for Washington. Stupid is the stat. Kudos to Washington for playing playoff basketball for like 2.5 months. That's sort of like their reward. It seems to me like they were able to come from the depths of hell and be able to rise up and to play the number 1 seed. And I know it's not the reward that they want for this, but you got off to such a terrible start. You couldn't really increase that much what you're able to do besides just getting into the playoffs that, shake it up for next year, because you got to I think you're playing against the NBA champions of this year, and it's going to be tough to try to put them down for 4 games. I don't know if you're getting 1.
You're absolutely right. And it just goes to show, like, Westbrook didn't have a great offensive game again, and there's been a few of those now already in this run, but Beal looked better besides being 1 for 6 from downtown. But you got to feel pretty good if you're Washington, if you're getting 12 points out of Rui Hachimura, you got 12 out of Len.
Yeah.
Davis Bertans finally consistently hit some shots. He was 4 of 8 from downtown, gave you 14 points. He got 12 out of Danny Gafford. Like, if you've got 4 or 5 guys on your Washington Wizards that are in double figures, that is a boon. Yeah. Typically, but that's not enough in this case. And then
I think you did what you could be expected to in this game.
Yeah.
Meaning, like, you expect more numbers probably just because you got used to him from Westbrook and the fact that he was putting up a triple-double every freaking night. But he's not going to do that every night. There's a reason they were so hard to do, and what he has done is so special. It's difficult to do. To expect Beal and Westbrook to combine for 60 or 65 a night, it's not realistic.
Not against those Sixers because of the defenders that we talked about, right?
That's what I was just going to mention. Yeah. You're very right. You're very right with that, especially against this Philadelphia team. Like, the fact that you got, 40, what did Russell get, 16, 14, 16?
Yeah, 49 points total between them.
The fact that you got 50 against them, it's still a pretty good effort, and you're still, within 7. I think it's kind of what you're going to get. Like, is there a chance you both get 60 combined for 60? Sure, but there's a chance I sprout wings too, right? Like, well,
it's possible, and if you
guess. I don't know the extent.
If you do get 60 on that night, it sure feels like that's going to be the night where you get 4 points out of Hachimura and Bertans goes 0 for 6, right? It's just,
you go the whole Jokic effort. Like, okay, these 2 guys are going to beat us. No one else is.
And I will say this is backtracking quite a bit when you talk about sweeps, and I would rather have a sweep than the tail end gentleman's sweep where a team is up 3-0 and drops a game because they lost focus or whatever, and you got to play that 5th game even though it's an inevitability. In those cases, I am not a fan of sweeps, or I'm not a fan of a 5-game series, and I'd prefer just to get it over with and get the 4 wins. However, those type of series can be a little bit more fun if the underdog or the team that's going to lose in the end gets their win, like in game 1 or game 2, and you're like, oh, they're going to do something here. And then if it turns into a 5-game series, you still feel like you got your money's worth. But for me, I'd rather have that sweep than, we're up 3-0 and now it's 3-1, but we all know we're probably going to win game 5. To me, let's just get that over with.
Well, let me ask you about that, as we've sort of, we can't really talk about the Knicks and Hawks yet. They haven't played. So, I mean, there's still a couple of games on the docket. I feel like we mentioned the Lakers. I just went to halftime with the Lakers down by 10. What series do you think sort of feels like that? Like you said, you think it's like the Mavericks and Clippers series? It sort of feels like, well, that was eye-opening, and then maybe the Clippers are able to rebound, relax, readjust, and reconfigure.
I think that's probably a 6-7 game series. That one too.
Oh, okay.
I wouldn't be surprised if Atlanta, who's talented enough, picked up a game early. I know you don't like that one, but that they pick up a game or 2 early, and it's more of a series than anticipated, although I do think the Knicks ultimately will win it.
Wait, do you think there's a chance the Knicks sweep? Bruh, do you want to be my new best friend? Do you want to be my new best friend?
No, it's not as much of a chance that they sweep than it is that the Hawks pick up a couple of games. But it could very well be, and I'm all over the board here, it could very well be that the Knicks get up 2-0, 3-0, and then Atlanta wins 2 in a row, makes it a series, and the Knicks got to close it out that way. But that one is a little harder for me to predict. I think New York gets it in the end, but Atlanta's going to pick up a game here or there because the Knicks do struggle on offense at times, and Atlanta can get hot. You can get the Trae Young game in there where there's just nothing the defense can do. But for me,
that's the thing. I'm sorry.
To answer your question real quick, and then we'll go to the Knicks. To me, the one where somebody could pick up a game early that's unsurprised or that's very surprising is actually Memphis and Utah, which is there a smaller market first seed that now draws like an even smaller market like that, where the league and everybody else is going to go, geez, are they even on NBA TV? Like, I don't even know if I'm going to watch. And it's unfortunate because Utah's a really fun team when they're on, and Memphis is a good young team also. But I do think the Grizzlies, having been through what they just went through, which was 2 really tough games, and they're in rhythm. They're a young team that takes you out of rhythm, whereas Utah has been sitting for a little bit. The Jazz also sat their starters in their final regular season game. Donovan Mitchell's been out a couple of weeks and now is coming back. I think there's a rust factor there that the Grizzlies very much can take advantage of because the Jazz are such a rhythm-oriented team. Yeah, there's some star power there, but it's about that execution. It's about making the right plays. It's about having knockdown shooters, which they absolutely have, but that's rhythm stuff. And Memphis kind of specializes in taking you out of that. You add rust into that equation, it's not going to be surprising if the Grizzlies steal an early game, maybe even 2, and make it a series, even though I would ultimately expect the Jazz to win this matchup.
Jazz are 9-point favorite in that game. I do not like that number at all.
No.
That seems way too heavy for game one. Too heavy.
If Donovan Mitchell had been healthy this whole time and they were rolling into the playoffs, I'd feel a lot differently about that.
Sure. Like if they were fighting to get a home court game right up until like Saturday afternoon or Sunday afternoon or something, and Mitchell had been there the whole time. Yeah, sure, right. Like, but the fact they've just sort of been, over a week on coast mode, and then now getting back down to, still just feels like a lot of points to put on Utah.
And remember, Conley wasn't healthy either. It was the whole backcourt was down, and Conley's been kind of in and out of the lineup all year, probably on some load management because of his age. But that's another very, very key piece that you're asking to just plug right into a playoff atmosphere against a Memphis team, not to be like cliche or too cute about it, but that will fight and claw you the entire time, even if they're down 20. Like, Memphis is just one of those teams that really doesn't stop playing the way they play, regardless of what the score is, and that's very much to their credit. They're a tough team.
No, I think it's funny. The memes that have been going around about Mike Conley taking on his former team are pretty hilarious. One of them has Wesley Snipes from, I think, Blade Runner or something, where he's about to shoot someone, but he's got, the tears in his eye. Like, he doesn't want to do it. They're pretty funny. There was a video from a movie, and I don't even know what the movie is, but there's these 2 guys sort of facing off like they're about to fight, but all they're doing is saying super polite things to each other. It's like, I like that. What you smell like. So you smell nice. You want to go out and get a beer after this? Right. How about 2? How many beers do you want to get? 2, 3, 4, 5, all of them? It is pretty good.
The crazy thing, just real quick on Conley, is how quickly time changes. This is his second year in Utah, and there's like no Grizzlies left from when he was last there. Like, that's how much that team has changed just in 2 years, a complete overhaul.
Yeah. Hey, congratulations to them, because they're, freaking playing in the playoffs with that complete overhaul in just a couple of years. Okay, so
we can talk your Knicks to wind things down here.
Sweet. Okay, so the one thing I did want to mention about the Knicks, who are in a pick'em right now with Atlanta, is that as much as I do say it's going to be a sweep, and it will be, the only thing that an analyst with any kind of credibility, which I am not, would say about this is that because the Knicks are so low scoring, that there is such a shorter leash for being able to watch the Knicks run away from a team, right? Like,
absolutely,
the Knicks are going to win this series, but every game is going to be tough. And every game's probably going to be within 2-3 possessions at the very max. So it's going to, like, when I go home to watch this, my butt will be clenched for 2.5 hours. And I just fully expect that for the 4 games it takes to get past Atlanta, in the 4 games that it will take to get past their next opponent in the 4 game. Right. So, but the Knicks have sort of they're the ones that are on the razor's edge when it comes to sort of performance. They got in here with the hard-nosed grinding defense and the offense that does just enough. And Julius Randle, fresh off like possibly just being sent off the planet for basketball, having one of these top seasons where you're like, wow, no one saw this coming
He had a poor man's MVP season. Is really what it is.
Yeah. And that's probably as bad a respectable way as I could put it. Like, no one wanted to talk about it, but his numbers are freaking phenomenal. And I think partly it's because the Knicks aren't a 1 or 2 seed, and also because, the Knicks aren't that sexy to watch. There's nothing fun really about them.
It depends on what type of basketball you like. They are.
Well, no one likes our type of basketball anymore.
Well, just the young kids on their TikTok. The ones
who are trying to get all the likes on TikTok. By the way, you're right. That Memphis game is going to be one where everyone's like, I hope someone's TikToking from there. At least show the scoreboard every now and then, because we don't know where we're going to find this. Like, can we stream like a box score somewhere? That I think I'm with you. I think the totality of the series goes to New York. I really hope for a sweep, because my worry is that if it gets to 6 games, it's going to 7 games. And Trae Young's the guy that's probably going to be able to go off and hurt you more than anybody else on either one of those rosters. And because those teams are going to be so tight like that, that's my worry. So I think the Knicks need to get out of there in 5. The longer you let a team like Atlanta with some of the potential explosiveness, because the Knicks have none of that explosiveness, the longer that sort of tends to stick around, the worse I feel, and the longer my butthole stays clenched.
Please just live tweet about the status of your clenched butt throughout.
I might. I just might do that.
Just make up some levels, and you can update us on what DEFCON level you've reached on your backside.
We are we are cartoon balloon knot right now. That's what we are.
Anyway, so you're absolutely right about Trae Young, and the mantra in the NBA over the last 10 years, which has very much rang true, is yes, defense still wins championships. You got to get key stops, but good offense still beats good defense in the NBA. It just flat out does. The question with Atlanta, yes, they have the talent. They don't have the depth we thought they would have coming into this season because of the injuries, but they still have very credible depth up and down that roster. The question is going to be, do they have the cohesiveness? Whereas New York has built like an identity and a cohesiveness around their defense all year, even though, like you said, the offense kind of comes and goes at times. Atlanta's capable of some fireworks, but in a playoff type atmosphere, especially a very hostile environment, Madison Square Garden's going to have 15,000 people in these first couple games.
Did you see they sold out in like 15 minutes?
Yeah, it's going to be loud and vicious in there. And Atlanta's got to be able to fight through that. And with a bunch of younger guys who have not been in that type of atmosphere before, remember, like Lou Williams has done it before, but Bogdanovich has never done it. He played in Sacramento. Clint Capella's done it a couple of times when he was in Houston. And Danilo Gallinari has been in some big playoff moments, whether it was with the Clippers or especially when he was with Denver. Like, he's been to that before. But your main young guys have not. Trae Young, Bogdanovich, Herter, Cam Reddish, who probably won't play in the series, DeAndre Hunter, John Collins is another one. Like, that's a big part of your cadre, where not only is this their first playoff experience, but you're going against a really gritty, kind of battle-tested type of group. Even if they're young and don't have a ton of playoff experience themselves, it's an identity type of team and a very hostile environment. The Hawks are going to have to grow up fast if they're going to win this series. And I think that's why a lot of us are picking the Knicks, because when it comes down to some of these intangibles, the Hawks may get those, but it's probably not this year that they get it. This is going to be the year that they kind of learn the hard way, I think.
2 things, if you're watching this, to watch out for the Knicks. And that's how you know if they're having a good chance to win in 4 or 5. Watch the point guard, Alfred Payton. If he is sucky like he's been the last 2 weeks and turning the ball over, and he's not an offensive threat at all, that's bad news, because that's been how he's played. Maybe the near week off has been good for him to sort of figure something out. Tom Thibodeau loves him for his defense, so that's a thing. Also, watch Julius Randle early. When Julius Randle starts to get into a rhythm early into the first quarter, which they try to feed him often to get him into that, he gets in that rhythm, and this year he's a different guy. He shed some weight. He's worked on his agility and his shooting. He's much better than what people are going to remember from. And I bet the vast majority of people even listening to this or watching BbA haven't watched much of him in the Knicks this season anyway. He's a lot better than the Julius Randle you remember.
And I will say this for the Hawks. They got a couple of long arm guys who on paper can make Randle have to work a little bit. Collins plays big. Capella is certainly springy. There's a couple of other bigger defenders hanging out there on the Atlanta roster. So they can throw some big bodies at Randle and force him to put the ball on the floor and to be mobile about it. I don't think you'll see
Randle. Do that. He can do that this year.
Absolutely he can. I think that's where you'll see him having to drive on those guys versus be the spot up shooter, which he also has capable of being. But based on the matchup, he's not going to overpower guys, so he's going to have to beat with that quickness and that leverage to the basket in this particular matchup.
I think he's done such a good job of reshaping his body and reshaping how he plays, not just what he does when he's there, but how he plays and understanding his leverage and what he has, and also adding a little bit of speed for the fact that he's been this far into the league and just now sort of the lights come on for him at this kind of level. So,
no disagreement there.
Knicks in 4.
I'm not gonna Stephen A you and make up a controversy for no reason on that. I see it.
Knicks in 4, baby. Knicks in 4.
I'll say Knicks in 5 and a half. Knicks in 5.5.
5.5.
Because I think 5 is a given, honestly. And the Hawks are certainly capable of getting to a game 6. I don't really feel comfortable saying that will happen, but I don't think there's any way this is shorter than 5 games. That's where I'm going with that. I don't think it goes 7. I don't think it goes 7.
I'll still. Oh my God! If it goes 7, we're not doing the podcast that day or that week, or we may just figure out a way to live stream it or something like that. I don't know what to do. Like I'm not. The Knicks sold out.
It'll just be Arky Shea butt clenching live tweets. That's all it'll be.
Well, you'll get a live direct shot just of my butthole the whole time. That's what you'll get. Just for the clinchness. Don't be weird about it. I'm not ready.
That's not going to be on YouTube. That'll be a different streaming service. We won't get into that.
That's our OnlyFans that we're starting. Hey, Joel, did you? By the way, the Knicks sold out in 15 minutes. You see, the Nets were still struggling to sell their tickets.
I had not seen the dichotomy difference on that.
I think they were I think they were struggling to sell. They were working on a vaccine only or a vax section only. And they were struggling to sell those tickets. So James Harden put out a video like, "Hey, for want you to go right now, tickets are half off, baby. Or you do, I got you. I'll cover half your tickets." It's like.
I mean, it could just be that there's not as many people in Brooklyn who've gotten the vaccine, right?
There's also this.
Let's play that. Let's play that.
No one grows up as a Brooklyn fan, okay? They're all Knicks fans.
Right.
Relax, people. I don't care how many good players you get on your team. Durant should have gone to New York. You could have been a champion where somebody cared. But whatever. Hey, listen, I'm over it. I'm completely over it. We got Julius Randle now. Kevin who? I don't know that guy.
I do enjoy how much of a Knicks fan you are and how much invested in the city aspect of that with your statements that you just said, but you are not a New Yorker yourself.
Oh, I've never even been.
It really is funny to me. And there's a couple other people, like Sid Mohapatra, our good buddy who's been on the show before, originally from India, lives in the UK now, huge New York Knicks fan, and kind of that same sort of attitude, but the tie to the city and that sort of thing is really funny. But it's
true, Joel. To be fair, I'm not saying anything that's like earth shattering or brand new. Everyone grew up being Knicks fans, right? They're Knicks fans. Brooklyn literally has been around 19 minutes, okay, in NBA terms.
And
New Jersey
most people
just a little bit longer.
Yeah, and most people didn't grow up being Nets fans either.
Right.
It was just a tough sell.
Yeah, you're swimming upstream to start. Listen, you can get all 3 players, and I don't know why you'd want to go to that dump at Barclays, relatively speaking. Yeah, hey, listen, I've never been, but I've seen all the pictures, and I've seen all the ratings. It's consistently in the bottom 5 of arenas for people. Players, they're not huge fans of that place, but regardless, enjoy.
Do you think this is the last question, because then we got to be done. Do you think more people in maybe the last 5 years and the next 5 years going forward, so we'll just make an arbitrary decade, more people will grow up being born into being Nets fans or Clippers fans? Because it's such a similar thing with the Lakers and the Clippers out in LA, where, yeah, you got some people that are Clippers fans because the Clippers have been there longer, like actually in LA.
Yeah.
And some people do it just as a novelty or because they really don't like the Lakers. So you pick the other team. I feel like more people will still be growing up as Clippers fans than Nets
see, I'll
fans.
take the Nets because I think if you want a bandwagon right into that fandom and you sort of
now's the time to do it.
Well, like when you're going to become a fan, right? Like you're going to come with a fan. Like you're not going to become a fan when a team sucks, right? Like unless your parents or family are sort of super into it and you sort of watch and suffer together, like, you know, misery loves company. But I think you want to go with what's hot, what's fresh, who's got star power. And LA doesn't really have the star power. Like Kawhi Leonard and Paul George compared to James Harden, Kevin Durant, and Kyrie Irving. Like who? Now that's granted if they stay, you know, more than the next 2 years, you know, like, and then all of a sudden you could be capping exactly like the years that we're talking about. And the next 5 years, how about they were there for 3 seasons? But I think
Kyrie could retire tomorrow because he wants to go, you know, live in an ashram somewhere or something like that. Like he just may decide to go do something like that.
That was so possible. I thought you were reading breaking news. That's how possible that is. All right, Joel, that's going to do it for us. You want to do this thing again on Wednesday?
Yeah, we'll certainly do that. And of course, if you're listening to us on Spreaker, Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcasts, and you want the video version, please come on over. We are on YouTube. You can get the videos. Give us a share, like, subscribe, all of that good stuff. And if you're on YouTube and want the audio version, vice versa, all of that. And nondescript number 62 Scott Pollard episode, like Scott Pollard, is in the books. And we'll be back on Wednesday for the bite.
Watching Andre Drummond in all white is like watching a like rec league player like in his 50s, you know, that's got a little too much junk around the trunk, but actually can ball. It's really, really good. Like he just committed another like 2 turnovers in a row. It's just hilarious. Just, but then he makes a great play where like he does like a spin move. You're like, dude, who else on the planet can do that? Andre Drummond, ladies.
He's a big fellow.
Yes. All right. Bye, Joel.